Merry Christmas, everyone. Happy New Year. Welcome to the Life Testimonies podcast, Christmas episode. And as you see, I'm wearing a Santa hat, but my hair doesn't look all that great right now. So I decided, why not? And Jeff, you don't mind, do you, if I wear this?
No, no, not at all. Absolutely. It's the time of year to do that. You only get to do it once a year. It's the greatest time of the year, right?
Thank you so much. I really appreciate this interview as well and the opportunity to talk to you. Everyone, we have a special guest. This is Jeff Higgins, who's used his life's heartbreaking challenges to fuel his drive for inner peace. Now, this guy was raised in Cincinnati and he founded a business almost like 21 years ago. And
Yeah.
now he acts as a company's chief security officer. Um,
Strategies.
struggles and summits.
Chief
Yes,
strategy
struggles
officer.
and summits. Chief strategy officer. Yes. And struggles and summits. We'll get to know him a little bit more. Jeff, welcome to the Life Testimonies podcast.
Chris, thanks for having me today. It's such a blessing to be here. And I'm just thrilled to be able to spend this time with you and your audience.
I'm so happy that you are here and you showed up at a good time. You showed up 1 minute before. So I can see how spontaneously real and genuine you are. You're not the type to say, oh, it's 15 minutes late. I'm like sitting here thinking, what?
Yeah.
So
I find that a lot of people are happy when I'm on time for podcasts. I don't know what that says about podcast guests, but
it's funny. Um, Jeff, thank you for joining us, as mentioned before, and
yeah.
Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to you. Um, could you give us a little bit of background of who Jeff Higgins is and the most challenging situations you face, and how did you navigate through them, and just everything from when Jeff was young to where he was living to what's happening with him now?
Right. So, like you said, struggles and summits. That's what I title my talk. I've had a lot of summits in my life. On April the 6th, 1983, in the cafeteria of Milford High School, I met Shelley, and we've been together ever since. And we built a beautiful life together. We have three wonderful daughters, three great son-in-laws, and seven grandchildren that bring us much joy. We have started our own company, as you mentioned. We make seasonings, not little bottles of seasonings. These are 50-pound bags of barbecue seasoning that go on potato chips that you buy at the grocery store. And we've been very successful. Like you said, 21-year overnight success story. We've been very blessed in a lot of ways. I've always felt it important since I was young, for my younger experiences, to live a life of purpose. And so, I've together with Shelley, my partner in crime, as I like to say, have endeavored to live a life exemplary of that, as best we could. We feel that that's our higher calling. So, we both served on the youth group. I taught senior high Sunday school for 17 years, and that's a character building experience, I can tell you. Served on church councils, led a couple of churches. And then in 2016, I kind of did the ultimate thing, right, Chris? So this was I guess you call it a bucket list item. I decided that I wanted to climb a mountain, and this mountain was Mount Rainier in Seattle, Washington. It's a technical climb. It's not you don't drive to the top of it. It's across glaciers and crevasses and up rocks and things like that. And I decided that in line with trying to live a life of purpose, that I would attach a bigger purpose to it. And so I used this occasion to raise $25,000 to build a school for special needs children in rural Guatemala, where they don't have any resources for children with autism and Down syndrome and things like that. So I summited Mount Rainier August the 16th, 2016, or I'm sorry, August 11th, 2016. And, that was a great accomplishment, of which I was extremely proud, and, made even greater by the fact that I was able to raise that money for that school in Guatemala. Um, but that's kind of the typical introduction you get, right? It's all the summits, the speakers, the guys on the guests. They want to tell you about all their great things in life. But I find that in life, our greatest learnings come from our deepest struggles. When I was young, my older brother was out of control, I guess is the best way to put it. He was violent. He had a temper. One time, multiple times, I should say, he punched holes in the walls of our house. And I remember one time my mom taking a picture of our family, a portrait picture off of the buffet, and hanging it over the wall, the hole in the wall that my brother had punched. And I find that healing from my experience comes through transparency. So today I want to take down that picture so we can fix some holes together, right? So yeah, so my brother was a violent person, and he and my sister were my stepbrother and sister. So I was kind of that younger, pesky stepbrother, and as a result of their personalities and my position, they physically abused me on a regular basis. Mom was an alcoholic. She, as far as I can remember back, had a drinking problem, a pretty severe one. When I was 11 years old, she drove her car the wrong way on the highway and under a semi truck, where she died at the age of 38.
Um,
My brother was a cut of the same cloth, and he was 22 3 years after mom died, when he, beer in hand, drove his car under the back of a semi
mm,
where he died. So by the age of 14, I had lost two immediate family members. And as you can imagine, I mean, that hits you pretty hard. And it hit my sister, my older sister. Her name is Krista. It hit her hardest, I guess hardest, or she just didn't deal with it in the right way. So she turned to drinking herself to, I guess, deal with her inner emotions. But she was oftentimes in the hospital because of her drinking, found unresponsive on the floor of her home. So one time I was visiting her, Chris, and I was pleading with her with tears in my eyes. I'm like, Krista, I've had to bury mom and I've had to bury Tim. Don't make me bury you too. Not long after I summited Rainier, Krista broke the promise that she made to me that day when I was called to the hospital, and this time there was nothing that could be done. And I was asked to make the decision to remove life support. I spent the last 3 days of her life with her as she slowly died.
hmm.
While losing my mom and my brother and my sisters, you can imagine, were very difficult storms in my life. A couple months after my sister passed away, the biggest storm of all hit. I was golfing with my friend Chris, Father Chris. Chris was a big golfer, and he and I loved to golf. He said, in fact, he told some fellow priests one day that he wanted to die in a sand trap. And this day after golfing, he wanted to go for a ride in my car, and we had an accident where we ended up down an embankment upside down in a sand trap where Chris died. I was charged, pled guilty to vehicular manslaughter, and was sentenced to jail time, house arrest, like license suspension, community service, all kind of extra goodies and stuff like that. So, and I guess, Chris, that's the sum of the struggles as a result of my accident. My own high functioning alcoholism turned into a rage that almost consumed me. And I look back now where I sit today, not long after all of this, but I'm living my best life. And I muse at what it is that has kept me from becoming the fourth headstone in my family. And that's what I talk to people about, because I think a lot of people are struggling, and maybe their struggles aren't the same as my struggles, but struggles hit us all the same. They cause the same damage for all of us. And, I've learned a few things on my multiple rebounds in my life that I think are very useful and very helpful.
What an amazing inspirational story, but still sad and sorrow. I can't imagine what it's like to lose a couple of siblings, but I know what it's like to lose my parents. One died of cancer, and the other one
Mm,
died 9 years later of lung and liver cancer. And I missed them both. And the
right.
question I want to ask you, Jeff, is number one, how difficult is it to share this, knowing that every time you mention I lost my brother, and every time you mention I tried to plead with my sister, and then now you have headstones with your parents, your brother, your sister. How does it make you feel? Like what's the raging storm that's going inside you every time you mention these? I can notice that when you mention the story, I saw your face go from joy to
Right.
sorrow, and I
Yeah,
can't imagine. Can you share with us what
sure.
you were going through when that happened?
Yeah, and it is. And I notice that in myself when I go back and I watch these podcasts when I relate my story. My demeanor changes somewhat. It is still hard, right? It's a tough story, and I'm sure it's hard to listen to too. And at the time, yeah, I didn't always deal with things the right way when I was younger, or when I was, after the accident. Even there were times that I did not handle it the right way, and it's easy to make the wrong decisions during the difficult times. We have to be real careful. A couple days after the car accident, we were sitting in bed, my wife and I, contemplating the horror of what had just happened. And she looks at me and she says, Jeff, we've tried to set an example of how to live during the good times. Now we have to try to set an example of how to live during the difficult times. And that's hard. That's hard to do. That's a real call to all of us, I think, to try to live our best selves and be our best selves during the most difficult times, because that's when heroes are made, right?
Can I ask you how your faith in the Lord, how it affected your spirituality when you were going through these things and the storms inside you and the struggles, and then you have your faith in God? Like, what was that
Yeah.
like for you?
Yeah. God and I have had an up and down relationship over the years. And my faith has been a huge part of my story ever since I was young. My mom, for all her flaws, made sure that we were brought up in a faithful environment, and I think I guess that stuck somewhat. But after the accident, it's like um, I had a lot of self pity. Sure, I was like Job, right? And Job,
Mhm. Yeah.
he uh, he goes on for I don't know how many chapters complaining about his situation and asking why and all that. And I certainly did a lot of that. I was real mad at God. I tried to dedicate my life to you, God. And I see all these people in the Bible, and it doesn't escape me that they all suffered greatly. I said, but I can't do that, God. I'm not that person. I'm too broken to do anything. I was like Humpty Dumpty. I was, couldn't be put back together again. I felt like my life was pretty much over.
Why did you think that?
I was too broken. I didn't think I could ever recover. Inside, you feel so broken inside. It's like, in order to live an effective and purposeful life, you got to be emotionally and mentally straight, right? And I didn't think I could ever regain that again.
Especially
But God,
losing your friend in an accident and everything. Oh,
yeah, and that's a here. I'll give you I've got a reading. When I was in jail, my I had my jail Bible. Since you brought it up, I'll get my Bible out here. But when I was in jail, um, I circled we go to the Bible a lot for inspiration and for motivation. And the Bible is great for that, of course, but at times, it's better. It's good for other things as well. And for me at that time, I was just so low and broken. Like I said, I
Mm.
felt like I was, just not reachable. And I was reading my Bible though, and I, it tends to kind of get me back. But I was reading through the book of Job, and I thought, oh yeah, here's Job. That's going to encourage me. So I'm reading it, and instead, what Job gave me was a voice for my anguish. When in Job 3 it says, "Why does God bother giving light to the miserable? Why bother keeping
Mm.
bitter people alive? Those who want in the worst way to die and can't imagine anything better than death." Who count the day of their death and their burial as the happiest day of their life. What is the point of life when it doesn't make any sense? When God blocks all the roads to meaning. That was December the 9th, 2017. I've got it highlighted here in my Bible from when I was
Wow.
in jail. You asked me how I was feeling. That's how I was feeling. You know, I was mad at God. I imagine kind of like Job was.
And that was a time in your life that you just wanted to drop everything, give up, and walk away from the cross of Christ.
Yeah, I still knew that Jesus rules. I still know who God is during this time. I did not say, you let this happen, you can't be. I just knew that it is what it is, It's like Job. I was asking why, and God answers because, my ways are higher than your ways. You don't have to understand. You just do the best with what you're given. And, that's what I try to do.
I guess you and your brother had a close relationship. Were you close with your sister as well?
I was marginally close. They were, she was 6 years older. My brother was 8 years older than me. So there was a little bit of an age gap there, and they were from my mom's first marriage. It was an interesting relationship. Tim caused a lot of turmoil in our house, and I was happy when he was away at juvenile detention. But at the same time, he was my older brother, and I didn't know he was my stepbrother at the time. He was my older brother, and little brothers just look up to their older brothers, right? And yeah, my relationship with my sister was difficult because I think that I've always kind of felt that you stick by family, unless they're like hurting you or your family, that you do what you can for them. And so it was very difficult for me. It was very frustrating for me. I had a mother that I couldn't. I was only 11 years old, but I felt responsible that I couldn't help her to get well. And I felt the same way about my sister. I spent, I don't know how many years, but I was an alcoholic myself at the time, and I didn't have a clue. And I don't know that some people, Chris, honestly, I mean, you do your best, but at the end of the day, the choice is up to them, and she made her choice.
So I take it your brother and your sister didn't have a relationship with Jesus?
No.
Mm. That's
Although
that's tough.
if you were to ask them, my sister would say she believed, but my brother, no, no, unfortunately.
But you don't know really the last few seconds of death whether they will begin to bleed. Because I remember when my dad was dying of cancer, and this was a Tuesday night on May 29th, 2002, when my dad passed away. And before I left, I whispered in his ear, Jesus loves you. Thank you very much for being my dad. And in a coma, he was like trying to listen to what I was saying. I don't know. Maybe he is with the Lord. I will not know that. The same with my mom. My mom passed
Excuse
away in
me.
1993.
Mhm.
You don't really know.
No, no,
But
you don't, and I take solace in the fact that that's a sovereign decision. That's above my pay grade. You know who gets in and who doesn't, and you know I believe that ours is a merciful God and will give us every opportunity to acknowledge Him as King. And yeah, you never know. Last minute, you know, what do they say? There's no atheist in a foxhole, right?
mhm. So when you have these tragedies happen in your life, and it's such a remarkable position you're in now, where you're still wanting to serve the Lord, you have a smile on your face, the joy of the Lord is just shining upon you. Every success that you have, do you ever get in your mind, this is for you, Mom? This is for you, whatever your brothers and sisters are. I'm doing this for you. Did you ever think, like struggles and summits, for instance?
Hmm.
Can you share a little bit what that's about? And can you share with us what's the purpose of this?
Yeah, yeah. So the purpose, that's a good question. That's a big question, obviously. But I believe that to whom much has been given, much is expected. I've been given a lot, Chris, by most measures, you know, and I feel that I have an obligation to do something with that. I feel called. No, it's not. This is for you, Mom, or this is for you, Tim. It's more like this is for you, God. You know, this is for all the people out there that are hurting, that are depressed, that are struggling, that are stressed. Know what it's like. I've been there, and it's not a fun place to be. And it's yeah, so it's more like, you know, I'm just trying to live out God's purpose for me, and in His Word, and I think I have a unique opportunity to do that because of my experiences. And yeah, you know, I mean, to some extent, it's to honor those lives that went before me, though. Absolutely. To honor what they went through, to honor the struggle, and to make that something that just isn't a negative in this world, but actually we could possibly turn it into something that helps people. And I know that a lot of people have been helped by my story, um, and um, and I take a lot of. I'm very gratified by that.
I can imagine. And you're president on two church councils. You led community youth programs, submitted Mount Rainier to raise funds, which you mentioned, for special needs school in rural Guatemala. Why Guatemala? And I know it's, how does it make you feel when, are you really believe you're doing this for the Lord? Or are you like, I deserve this because of what I went through? Like, what was going through your mind at that point?
Right? Yeah, I know that's a dangerous game to get into about I deserve this because of what I've gone through. No, you know, I take great pride in it. I take great pride in you know, I love going down to Guatemala. I go there all the twice a year, I should say. It's a small mission. If I could, it's called dreaminvestgrow.org. It's a small mission that I support down there. And, you know, one of the things that I think is real important when I talk to people is how just vital to our mental health and well being gratitude is. You know, being grateful for what we had. I spent, you know, we're nearing the Christmas season. I spent Christmas in jail. And let me tell you, there's nothing in jail to remind you that it's Christmas.
Mm.
Um, and that gives you a lot of gratitude for the hustle and bustle that everybody complains about. It gives you a lot of gratitude for all those annoying Christmas songs, you know. And when I go to Guatemala, you know, I go to villages on the side of a mountain where they have no running water, no electricity. You know, they're suffering from malnourishment. The kids all have you know, most of them have parasites. It's a tough situation, and you go into this home and they've got an open fire where they cook their meals, and the smoke in the homes is, you know, causes respiratory illness, and it's a real, it grounds me, Chris. I think that it's so important for me to do that, for me to see that, for me to experience that on a regular basis, because it grounds me and it reminds me how very blessed I am.
Sounds like a blessing. So there's this Christmas story you wanted to share in prison and share with that with the audience?
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, it was just that I was in jail over Christmas, 2017. When I was in jail, um, I on Christmas Day, I was meeting with a friend of mine, and we were having a Bible study. There's one guy, and he would join me, and we were. I'm looking up the Bible verse that I highlighted on Christmas Day from jail, because I think it's important. We this stuff can beat us down, and sometimes it's hard to see that you're climbing for the summit of the mountain. It's hard to see the summit of the mountain. And it just seems like, there's another step on the snow, and you're hurting, and you're exhausted. And so it's hard sometimes, I think, to keep in mind, to remember that um, God promises us a better day tomorrow. And I'm a Romans 8:28 guy. They read it at my mother's funeral when I was 11 years old, that God can make all things work for good. And that's a
Hmm.
tough one to swallow sometimes. I know a lot of Christians that just have a real hard time with that one, but I believe it to be true, even after what I've been through, that God can
Hmm.
use all things. When I was in jail, I don't know why, but I highlighted this verse here. It was December the 25th, again, highlighted in my Bible on Christmas Day, 2017. And it's unique translation from Romans chapter 8 um, in the message. And it goes like this. It says, "This resurrection life you have received from God is not a timid, grave tending life. It's an adventurously expectant, greeting God with a childlike, 'What's next, Papa?' That's hard to do sometimes, but I I think that um, we should look upon our difficulties and uh, our most difficult times in our life, um, and say, okay, what's next, Papa? What am I going to do with this? I can sit and ask why all day long, but I think that that's kind of harmful. I think that oftentimes we ask that little three-letter roadblock, and there are no answers, right? And pain asks why when there are no answers. Healing asks what's next. And, it's important to understand that as we heal from our most difficult situations in life.
Did you think that when you were in jail you were ever going to be released?
Sometimes I wondered, even though my sentence was 90 days, I thought, they're never going to let me out of this place, are they? It was awful. Yeah, jail was a special experience, but I tell you, I was able to meet with and kind of, I guess, minister to young men in there, and
Mm.
to a lot of people. It was a unique experience. I could talk for hours about that. And I expected not to find so many people that I liked. but you're in there. I guess everybody's kind of subdued. Everybody's in stripes. So, even though I clearly don't fit in, I'm a businessman from the suburbs, and most of these are young punks and hoodlums from downtown, right? And but we were all just inmates in there, and there's a lot of humanity in jail, and a lot of inhumanity at the same time. It's a really incredible experience.
Well, since we're on the subject of prison, I don't get to ask this question a lot, but the prison ministries, where you're all like, some of them became Christians in the prison system,
Mhm.
and then there's the whole I guess, church service, and I don't know who the minister would be. I don't know if he's in prison or he's one of the guys that give you the last rites before you're put to death or something. But can you share with the audience and with me, because I always want to know this, are other inmates who are terrible people who hate Christians, whatever, has there ever been a time when there was a disruption in these services saying that stuff like that? Other, or did you get a chance to, you said you had a chance to talk to others about Christ. Tell us what that experience is like.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, there there was disruptions. Yeah, church service or church is just kind of a way for inmates to get out of their pod and move around and do something for a lot of them. And don't get me wrong, not all of them. That's a little bit of a cynical statement there, but yeah, and oh yeah, man, there was one one church service I remember, and I think it was just kind of wrapping up, and these two big guys just about went at it. I heard it was something about a girl or whatever, and we had all gone over to this one pod, and these people come in from outside from various local churches, and they do a little, half hour service. Maybe they'll bring music or something, give a message, but these two guys, I don't know what their beef was over this girl, but they just about went at it, and there were guys holding them back, and the folks that had come in to do the message for the day, they're just like, help us, Jesus, help us, Jesus. And I'm just backing away, trying to stay out of the way of these two guys. I don't want to get caught up in the middle of it. So yeah, jail's and let me make a distinction here. Most people don't realize this, but jail is very different than prison now. I think prison ministries, all right, that's when you're in for a long period of time. Jail is local, it's where you're being held until you get sentenced. And jail is
Mm.
actually worse. Jail is a much worse environment than prison is. Prison is, you get a lot more. Benefits when you're in prison. Jail, they try to make you as miserable as possible so you get out of there as soon as possible. So but yeah, there's a lot of violence in jail. Absolutely, I was lucky to not get involved with any of that myself because, like I said, I didn't fit in. Right, I I was clearly an outsider. I didn't walk right. I didn't talk right. I didn't have any tattoos. I was voted the whitest guy in the jail.
So you said your friend Chris was a priest?
Yes, he was a Catholic priest.
That that must have been really, that must have affected his church, the one that he was a priest under. The Catholic
Yeah,
Church probably got
yeah.
a hold that he was with his friend and probably thinking golfing, and then I can't imagine what was going on behind the scenes on his side. I was like, oh my goodness, wow. Like,
Yeah, yeah. There was a lot of bitterness. I'll be honest with you. A lot of bitterness towards me, and maybe there still is. I don't know. But yeah, it was a difficult time, right? It's very yeah, it's hard to explain. And it was in the newspaper, was all over it. The press was all over it. And the whole thing kind of went sideways, and there was a lot of bitterness that came out through the whole process, unfortunately, because that's unfortunate for my friend's memory. He was a good man and lived a good life, and it's he should be remembered, without negative emotions.
why did they think that you were the um, you were responsible for this? It was just an accident, wasn't it? Did they think you were
Well, yeah.
intoxicated?
No, I passed the sobriety test. I mean, that I was being reckless, that I endangered Chris. That well, and clearly I'm guilty of my friend's death. So, it's a man who was very well loved by a lot of people, and yeah, it was difficult. It was hard on the community.
Yeah. All these tragedies you had with losing your sister, your parents, your brother Tim, your friend, priest friend, uh, and yet the idea of finding peace, I know, was seemed impossible because you were plagued by guilt. But you had this new wake up call. So I know these challenges have shaped your resilience and determination in pursuing your goals in your personal life. What was that like for you, and how did that start when you said, I'm going to take a step of faith, and whatever God does or puts me through, then I'm going, because I've already experienced this. Now I can do anything. Like Titanium by Sia. You titanium, right? You're unstoppable. That's another song.
Careful now, careful now. I don't want to go start saying that, but no, it's a long, hard road. There's some key things. There's some important things that I think are critical to us healing from stuff like this. Like you brought up one of them, forgiveness and reconciliation. I knew that I would never return to a functional life again unless I was willing to practice some pretty high level forgiveness. I had to forgive myself first and foremost, and that's you talk about climbing mountains, buddy. That was a big mountain to climb. But what's the alternative? The alternative is I live a miserable life of unproductiveness, and I don't think that honors the memory of my family or my friend, and I think that they cry out to the grave for me to not let that happen.
Yeah, it's still, when you think of, I've gone through nothing compared to what you've gone through, and it kind of humbles me to realize that, I have only experienced the death of my parents and then death of a few friends, and one when he climbed out of a shower, boom, he was dead of a heart attack on the bathroom floor. So I hate to be found in that position. It's still terrible because he knew the Lord. So one day we're going to be seeing the ones that we think are in heaven, and thank God
Yeah,
for that.
Chris, it's you bring up a good point, and something I tell my audience is a friend of mine used to be a cop, and as a cop, he was with people in their final moments of life. He tells me that he finds it very interesting in their final moments of life that people often said the same two things: "I wish I had more time," and "Did I make a difference?" I was in some ways blessed by my experiences as a child because I learned at an early age what many people don't learn until the last moments. Life is short. My time here is indeterminate. I don't know what tomorrow holds. Make a difference now.
Yeah, that does remind me of a friend, a guy I know, that he was a sheriff of Alabama, and he hated God. He was a staunch atheist, and
Mm,
he hated anybody who was a Christian. So one day,
mm,
because of what he's going through, he went out and he decided to drive his cruiser in a area where nobody is around, and he took his gun out of his pocket, shot a bullet to make sure that it was loaded, put it to his head, click. What?
huh.
Huh? Click. So God will not even allow him to take his life. And he went down on his knees and gave his life to Jesus Christ. But that's to prove to you that God is real, because it's no coincidence that you would shoot the gun this way and it wouldn't fire this way. It was just click, bang, click. Like, it's got to be God, right?
So
So I know
I'll
God
tell
is
you,
real.
yeah, absolutely, and I'll tell you a story that, and if you'll bear with me, Chris, I make a point here, which is exactly to what your story there. I read to you that passage from Job when I was at my lowest and most broken.
Mhm.
3 days after that, it was December the 12th. It was my 40th day in jail. Okay. And I was on the phone with my wife, and all of a sudden I got a call over the intercom: "Higgins, you've got a pro visit." That's a professional visit. So I go out, they buzz me out into the Sally Port. I go out there, and there's nobody out there except for this little old lady that looks like Barbara Bush. So I said to the CEO, I said, "Hey, I'm Higgins. Where's my visitor? Is it up at the glass?" And he says, "No." He said, "There's your visitor." And he points over to Barbara Bush there. And I looked at her and said, "Ma'am," I said, "are you here to see me?" And she said, "I'm here to see Jeremy Higgins." She had a piece of paper in her hand and she read off of it. I just had it on my heart that I needed to come down here and be with Jeremy Higgins. I said, man, I don't know. I'm Jeffrey Higgins. And so she looks at the CO and he checks the computer and they say, ma'am, we've checked the entire Hamilton County Justice Center and Jeffrey Higgins is as close as we've got to Jeremy Higgins, and that's him. So I asked her again. I said, ma'am, who are you? Who sent you here? Why are you here? She said, well, I just had it on my heart that I needed to come down here and pray and be with Jeremy Higgins. And my name's Sister Karen, and I'm from the Franciscan convent, and Chris sent me. My friend's name was Father Chris Coleman. And, I tell people that I know it doesn't feel like it. And oftentimes when you're in the deepest, darkest spots, that it's hard to believe that heaven is close.
Mm-hmm.
I was in a fetal position in the corner, and I felt so far from everybody else's reality that nothing could reach me. Yet a little old nun who didn't know who I was, and I didn't know who she was, came from out of nowhere and did reach me. And I firmly believe that just like your sheriff friend, that during our most difficult hours, when we are the most broken, that the veil between us and God is actually the thinnest. And I
Mm.
think that we should all know that and remember that during our most difficult moments.
Wow, that's quite a blessing. That's quite an inspirational story. Thanks for sharing that with us, Jeff. Let me ask you about your family and your wife and grandchildren. Like, do they ever ask you about that story with your brother and your sister, and how do you share that story with them? How did you share that story with them? Because sharing that story with children would be a lot different than sharing it with adults. How do you deal with it?
Yeah, yeah. My grandchildren are not really old enough to kind of get the whole story like I told here today. I mean, the oldest, she's only 9 years old. But Chris, I've always been and raised my kids in an environment of transparency. We
Hmm.
talk about things around the dinner table that would make most families blush, I guess. But I think it's important. I think that the transparency is important. And I think that, that's where healing happens when we are transparent, because then you know that you're not alone, right? When we're in transparent community, that's where healing happens. That's where alcoholics get sober. That's where breast cancer survivors support each other, and it's it starts with being transparent, honest with each other about our most difficult situations, and so I've always been kind of that way with my family, and I imagine I will be as appropriate with my grandchildren. I mean, I'm out here, publishing my story in a lot of places, so I'm sure that they'll see it. But I hope that in some ways that it can be an example for them.
Yeah, we are the hands and feet of Jesus, so we have to. I know that whenever I mention that I'm a Christian, people watch you like a hawk
Yeah,
because
right.
there's
You.
yeah, because there's people out
Yep.
there that will tell you're a Christian. Well, because you don't know what their experience with a Christian was. Like I've
Yeah.
heard stories, and I'm like, how did that happen? When you mention the name of Jesus and you become one of the Lord's own, and you believe in Christ, that has merit to it. It's not like I believe in candy, and that's it. You're going to eat all this candy, or I believe in eating, and after your meal, you don't go a week from now. That was a great lasagna I had. No, when you know Jesus Christ, you got to wear that every day of your life, every second, because every time you breathe, like that's why Yahweh, like JWH. You know why it's only 4 letters? It's Yah.
Yeah. Like breathing.
It's a breath, yeah.
Yeah.
So we got to do that, and that's what we're doing. We're breathing the name of God every day because we're breathing it. You don't even realizing, but we're breathing it. Um, then what about the people that came into your life after you lost your friend Chris and all those? Are those the individuals you look to as role models, and how have they influenced your values and mindset?
Uh, no, I can't say that. I mean, like I said, healing happens in community through and transparency. And I'm blessed to have a lot of people that and a lot of it comes from church and from going to retreats, but a lot of faithful friends that were trying to support me as best they could. Right, it's hard, somebody in my situation, but and that's um they were there before the accident, during and
Mhm.
after. And yeah, there were there were times, Chris. I mean, between the accident and going to jail, I was hanging on by a thread. I was alcohol was taking over, sleeping pills and anti-anxiety medication, and I had one guy. He's a friend of mine, and I would call him at or texting in the middle of the night, and because I knew he was home or he was awake a lot. And man, just little things like that here and there that kind of kept me going. But yeah, that's what community in our church is about. When I was in jail, I got mail every day, several
Wow.
pieces, right? Most guys in jail don't get any mail. I
Mhm.
had hundreds of pieces of mail, and they used to, kind of chastise me about it a little bit, the COs and the other inmates. But that's a lot of times how we survive stuff like this, right?
Yeah, there's a movie I saw once on PureFlix called Dead Man Rising.
Mm.
Excellent movie. So if you get a chance to watch that one, that was pretty good. Yeah, I can imagine the people that you have in your life, and it's sort of like, did it come to your mind that, oh, I better not get too close because I might lose them too in an accident? Did it ever come to your mind that, oh,
Sure.
I lost
Yeah.
Chris, I lost my brother, I lost my sister, I might lose another friend, and I'm going to lose everyone around me. Oh no, then I'm next. So,
Right.
what kind
Right.
of urgency do you
Gunshot.
have on your mind about that?
You know, um, Yeah, I at times I do. It's kind of I've suffered through PTSD, and there are times when Shelly will be out, and I'm like, I haven't heard from her. Where is she? She was supposed to be home, and the devil tries to creep in, but we have to put our hands on the steering wheel of our thoughts, Chris, and I know that's just my experiences and my fears speaking out, and we can't act and we can't live out of fear. And so I just when those thoughts, emotions, fears pop up, I actively fight that stuff. And I it's not like any of us arrives at mental health and well-being. It's a constant maintenance thing every day. I practice things and every day, like forgiveness and practicing gratitude that help me maintain my mental health and well-being.
Mhm.
And that's just something I think we should all do.
I agree with you. I always ask my guests about how they deal with their mental health. And that's awesome that you do that because if you don't, you're gonna lose it. You like
Yeah.
I know this guy, and all you heard him at the altar was weeping and crying, and he was like 45 years old. He's just crying and saying, "Lord, Lord." And I'm like, wow, maybe I should be doing this too because I think everything's okay, but it's really not because if you're not prepared for eternity, God could take you today. How does that enter your mind that okay, maybe God will take me today? Because you're not guaranteed an hour, you're not guaranteed 5 minutes. What keeps you from thinking that? Like, I mean, God might take me today, but I know that if He does, I got to be prepared. How do you do that besides your
Yeah,
mental health?
just I guess because of my experiences, I'm very comfortable with death. Um, and that sounds kind of morbid, kind of odd, but it's not. I know, and I've always lived a life where I know that every day could be my last because that's the
Hmm.
way I grew up, and I know that stuff happens. And it sounds kind of trite, Chris, but people say let go and let God. I think
Hmm.
that there's great power in it is what it is. God's got His plan. God's going to do what he's going to do. All I can do is my part every day. And that's what I try to do. And that may mean he's got me in the plan tomorrow. And it may mean that he doesn't. But, as long as I'm here, I'm going to do the best I can. And I take, great satisfaction. Like I said, live a life of purpose, and you're not going to waste your days.
I understand that. Would you think that was Mount Rainier on your bucket list? Now that you can check that off, what do you think are items on your bucket list, if you had one, that you still like to fulfill?
Oh, I want to be a national speaker. I'm doing podcasts, and I love to do podcasts and get out there, and I'm reaching audiences I could never reach. But I love to be in person, face to face, and my I'm a retired entrepreneur. I'm very blessed to be at 57 in a position where I can try my second act out. And clearly I've got something to say, and I hope that people are going to find it useful, and I get to talk to a lot of people out there. So for me, that's what making a difference is about right now, at this point in my life. And I always said, I told you I had a seasoning company, right? So I always said, I'm not changing the world by making the next great barbecue seasoning for potato chips. It was what we did with our company, how we used it to serve the community, to serve our employees. And, I look forward to doing that in my next act in just a little bit different way.
Well, I know I talk about you're not guaranteed 5 minutes, but if you were guaranteed 5 years, what do you want to see yourself doing? Being the world-renowned speaker? Do you want to be right up there with that? What's his name? I can't remember his name. The big guy, the one that Tony Robbins. That's it. You want to be
Oh,
at
Tony
base level.
Robbins. Right. Right. Yeah. I just pray every day that I can be useful,
Yeah,
that I
good.
can serve a useful purpose, and I hope that means that my message resonates with so many people that they want to hear it, that it feeds them, that it helps them. That to me, it's not about that. Um, that I've helped or I've talked to so many people. It's about the guy the other day that said, you're talking about purpose in your life. You've got me thinking that I really need to reconsider the purpose in my life. It's the guy that tells me when I talk about forgiveness and reconciliation that he says, yeah, you've convinced me there's somebody I really need to reconcile with in my life. I'm, that makes the world a better place, and anything I can do to that end, I'm just a tool.
I take it as difficult for you to forgive.
No, well, I should say, yeah, no, not at this point. At the beginning, yes, but I'm serious when I say, I reached the conclusion that if I wasn't willing to practice some high level forgiveness, that I may as well just cash it in, because I believe that forgiveness. Well, let me tell you a story about forgiveness and reconciliation, and why one of the reasons I think it's so important, because I had made this decision, and during my trial, yeah, it was all over the news, on the news in print, here in Cincinnati, and there was a guy. His name was Gary, and he said he used to be friends, or that he was friends with Chris, and he was made it his job. Gary did to make sure that I got prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. He was talking to the prosecutor's office. He was talking to the press, and he was talking to Chris's family,
Mm.
and he stirred up a lot of bitterness. And he was probably the reason that I went to jail, for a crime that most people don't see jail time. I got 90 days. A couple years after this whole all went down, Gary reached out to me, and actually he sent me this letter. And in this letter, he asked for my forgiveness, and he wanted me to know that he forgave me. So it's like a two-way thing for him. And Gary wanted my forgiveness, and I had already decided that yeah, I forgave him long before he wrote me that letter. So I got in touch with him and I talked with Gary and I told him that yeah, I forgive you. I know it was a difficult time, and I was happy to give that to him. What I didn't realize at the time though is Gary was dying. That's why he was seeking reconciliation in his life, and I was happy to give that to him so that he could die in peace.
Yeah.
Um, and I hear these stories a lot, right? I hear stories about people in their last moments when they know that their time is near and they seek reconciliation. You've probably heard these
Mm.
stories, Chris, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So it occurs to me, Chris, that if that's what we do, and Gary, what he wanted to do is he wanted to die in peace. Well, doesn't it follow that if reconciliation is what we want to die in peace, that it's also the way that we can live in peace? I want to live in peace, and the path in my mind to peace of mind, to peace in my life, and frankly to peace in our planet is
Yeah.
reconciliation and forgiveness. And so I'm a forgiving machine, man, Chris. Somebody does something to me, I'm like all over it. I forgive them. If I feel negative emotions towards people, boy, I'm either praying about it or I'm saying in my head or whatever. I'm forgiving that person, and it may or may not involve me being face to face with them. But I know that that's vital to my mental health and well-being and my peace of mind in my life. And so I practice what I call radical forgiveness, and I think that it's useful for people to live their best life.
Does that include previous relationships you hurt and friends that you hurt and your parents, although they're no longer around, that there might have been some evidence of hurt? Did you forgive them as well? Because even when my parents had already been gone over 30 years, I still had to forgive them, even though I don't remember what I did. If I had to forgive them just in case, because I don't want to
Oh,
be, judgment seat of Christ and be told, listen, this and that happened. You didn't forgive your mom. You didn't. So I said, you know what, Lord, I forgive everyone. How was that for you?
right. Yeah, yeah. In my opinion, the 11 scariest words in the Bible to me are forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass
Hmm.
against us. That scares the bejeebies out of me. I don't know about you, but yeah, that's the importance of forgiveness is that, and it's not easy. It's not easy. I'm telling you to forgive some pretty hard stuff for a lot of people, right? Um, yeah, and it was hard for me. My mom, why couldn't she stop drinking? Why did she have to be that way? My brother and
Hmm.
sister for the way they treated me. The Gary. There was and most of all myself. I had to forgive myself for homicide. My friend is
Yeah.
dead. You know, that's when you put it like that, it kind of hits home, doesn't it? That's what I'm asking and what I'm telling you is very very difficult. But I firmly believe that it's the way that we live our best life.
I totally agree with you. Totally agree with you, Jeff. I read somewhere about you. It said that inner peace is a process that progresses one step at a time. Do you think you found peace, or do you think it's still way ahead?
Oh yeah, I seek the peace that passes all understanding. Wouldn't we all love to have that? Who doesn't want that, right? No, it's not all the time. I have my days that are less peaceful than others, and then I work on stuff like that, like repeating the forgivenesses in my mind, and taking control of my thoughts and thought processes. But yeah, but yeah, for the most part, absolutely. I feel like, I have reached a point in my life where, um, and another big thing I think it's important to remember, Chris, is that, that roadblock, it's 3-letter roadblock. Why? And unless you're willing to let go, that it's going to be hard to continue to move on and to move forward. So letting go of why and moving forward is so important to maintaining my daily health and well being, so that I can be, like I said, my goal is I want to be a tool. I want to be used for good purposes.
Me too, and financially as well. After doing the Dave Ramsey course, God has really helped me with my finances, and I want to be at the place where I can help people as well. I don't want to miss out what God has. Just
Right.
remember, Jeff, just remember, it's not about you, it's about Him.
Yeah.
So as soon
Right.
as you say, I can do better than God, then, you're going to be shown a lesson. But just remain humble about it and walk in faith. And what really brings me is really this Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean
Mhm.
not to your own understanding. In all your ways, acknowledge Him, and He will direct your paths. And that's something that's important, for God to direct your paths. I got a couple more really deep questions for you before we end this.
Sure.
Is that okay?
Sure.
Okay.
Absolutely.
All right, great. So, Jeff, are there any specific books that you've had a profound impact on your perspective or outlook on life?
I'm afraid I got nothing for you there. Yeah, I wouldn't say that, profound. I guess I lean on the Bible a lot, but I will tell you that there was a real important book, a couple of them that I've read. One of them is called the Body Keeps the Score. It's about how our traumas when we're young actually leave physical landmarks in our well being. And there's another one. You may be familiar with the five stages of grief, right?
Mm,
Yeah, so denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance.
hmm
And that was written by a lady. Her name was Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, and um, her work included her protege. His name was David Kessler, and based on their work together, after Elizabeth Kubler-Ross passed away, David Kessler wrote a book, and it's called The Sixth Stage of Grief. And what it talks about is how meaning and purpose is the sixth step of grief, and I think that that's just so profound, that we are conditioned in life to hide our most difficult circumstances, to run from them, to deny them, to hide them, um, and I don't think that we oftentimes look on them as assets that they are, or can be. It's not mandatory. It's a choice. Whether you're going to use your most difficult circumstances to be stepping stones or stumbling blocks. That's up to each one of us to make that choice. But I believe that David Kessler's book is very important for each of us, as we try to, find our own purpose in life and deal with our own difficulties and circumstances.
Yeah, and we will link that down below. People who want to end up maybe getting that book. Before we give you the last question, Jeff, can you give us how do people find you on social media and where they can connect with you and reach out to you?
Yeah, yeah. So I've got a website, and it's Jeff-Higgins.com. That's Jeff-Higgins.com. And you can go there. There's more podcasts there. And then, on Struggles and Summits on Facebook, you can always, I'd love any feedback that anybody has. Please go on. I'd love to hear from you.
That's excellent. Really appreciate that. Um, One question is there a particular life lesson you learned that you would like to pass on to others?
Yeah, life can be difficult. It can be very hard sometimes, and it's it can get us down. And I get that. I just want to encourage you. August the 11th, 2016, I summited Mount Rainier, and a year later, I was at the lowest and most broken point I could ever be in my life. My sister had died. I had had my car accident, and I was under indictment for homicide.
Mm-hmm.
August the 11th, exactly 6 years to the date, 2022, it was a Thursday also, I got my driver's license back. Climbing that mountain was the hardest, difficult physical struggle of my life. But you know what? The time since had been my most difficult life struggle. And I never, at times, I didn't think I was going to make it. But I'm here to tell everybody, wherever you are, I know it's not easy. You're not alone. And there is a better day ahead. Just keep taking one step at a time.
I really appreciate that, Jeff. And also Proverbs 3, 5, and 6 as well, which was mentioned before. So we really appreciate this, Jeff. Thank you so much for booking with us and sharing your testimony. It was just so inspirational. And I love that last remaining word of yours and just got your license back. That's awesome. God bless. So everyone, thank you for joining us on Life Testimonies Podcast. Jeff Higgins, everything is linked below if you want to reach out to him. So Jeff, I really appreciate this, and we're going to end this stream. Thanks,
Chris,
Jeff.
it's been a real blessing. Thank you very much. Have a great day.